What's up, guys? Welcome to the Outer Nexus. Tonight, we are going to go over the craziness that is happening in the world with Iran and a bunch of other stuff. But first, let's check out what the White House press secretary has to say about it.
I've said too much already. What I can show you is the images that have been beamed down to us from the Odyssey satellite system just a couple hours ago. This is the view out of the front door of the United States secret moon base. This was taken yesterday before we discovered the bear problem. And this one was taken just a couple hours ago. So, as you can see, bears everywhere.
Mr. President, Mr. President, yeah, those bears appear to have guns and motorcycles.
We believe they may be involved in some sort of intergalactic drug cartel, perhaps affiliated with one of the interstellar wizard alliances.
Wizard alliances?
Yes, next question.
Just a thought, more of a shot in the dark, but we wouldn't happen to be invading Iran today, would we?
You got me.
I fell for it. You almost got away with that one.
No, I went too far. I almost had it. I should have stopped after the slides. I knew I should have stopped
I
there.
didn't think anything about it until the cartel thing, and I was like, what?
Okay, all right, let's forget this whole thing. Who wants a drink? First round's on me. Come on.
Yeah!
All right. So the only reason that I think that's even mildly related is that was the whitest kids is because U.S. Army Secretary recently accidentally in an interview refers to the idea that we have a soldier on the moon who's an astronaut, and then a couple days later Israel invades Iran, quote unquote and so let's check this out. This is much more serious now. This is very, very devastating. So Israel hits Iran's nuclear program and military leadership in unprecedented strikes. This is from a few days ago, so this isn't quite current, but we'll get to the current stuff. Israel struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear missile and military complex early Friday in an unprecedented attack that has killed several of Iran's most powerful figures and plunges the wider Middle East into dangerous new territory. The strikes on Iran's nuclear program and senior military leaders could be a turning point in the long-running conflict, with Israel braced for a major Iranian retaliation and the threat of a wider regional war breaking out now a real risk. Later Friday morning, that retaliation appeared to be underway after Israel's military said Iran had launched more than 100 drones towards Israel and that Israel had begun intercepting them outside of its borders. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned that Israel will face severe punishment for the attacks and confirmed that a number of Iranian commanders and scientists had been killed. Iran's armed forces spokesperson said both the United States and Israel would pay dearly, while Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi called the attack a declaration of war. The U.S. was not involved in the strikes. Allegedly, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, noting that Israel had advised the U.S. that it believed the action was necessary for its self-defense. On Thursday, President Donald Trump had warned of the possibility of massive conflict in the Middle East that could take place soon. Posting on his social media platform, Truth Social, early Friday, Trump urged Iran to agree to a nuclear deal before there is nothing left, suggesting that subsequent Israeli attacks on the country could be even more brutal. Washington has long sought to limit Tehran's nuclear capacity, with the most recent negotiations in Rome last month ending with no agreement. A sixth round of U.S.-Iran talks had been scheduled for Sunday in Oman. It's not clear if that will go ahead. Obviously, that did not go ahead. Let's see. I'll switch over to this, to the more updated article. So there was terrifying strikes. Iranians living a nightmare following Israel's barrage of overnight strikes. This was just from last night. Iranians in Tehran said they were living through a nightmare after Israel's barrage of strikes overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. The Israeli military said it had launched a wave of strikes involving more than 50 aircraft on Iranian centrifuge and missile production sites overnight. All Iranians who spoke to CNN declined to be named for fear of their safety. I'm living in a nightmare, a 20-year-old Iranian woman told CNN. Another Iranian man, 32, said that after the calm of the afternoon, there was a barrage of bombs, adding that there were between 20 to 30 to 40 explosions about 7 kilometers from our house. The sound was insane and the street was destroyed, he said, adding that he and his family are still trying to decide whether to leave their home. Residents also recounted a mood of suspicion amongst authorities in Tehran. Another Iranian man said he was filming the empty streets in Tehran when he stopped and when he was stopped by an undercover police officer who asked for ID and looked through my phone. And you could see all these sites here. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. This is the satellite imagery to nuclear facilities. So there it is before, there it is after, there it is before, there it is after. So, and now we're kind of getting to the meat of it. Germany's MERS says Israel is doing the world's dirty work by attacking Iran. Praised Israel for doing the dirty work for all of us by striking Iran and preventing it from building a nuclear weapon. And I feel like a number of G7 countries feel this way because let me pull this up. Here we go. Now, as crazy as it is to do some sort of preemptive strike against Iran, it looks like G7 leadership, which is essentially the EU and parts of NATO, all agree that this was necessary. In Alberta, the G7 met on Monday, issued a joint statement saying Iran should not have nuclear weapons, affirming Israel's right to defend itself. Iran is the principal source of regional instability and terror. We have been consistently clear that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, declared the statement issued by the leaders of the US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Japan, along with the EU. They pledged to remain vigilant to the implications for international energy markets and stand ready to coordinate, including with like-minded partners, to safeguard market stability. The statement came as US President Donald Trump left the G7 meeting in Kananaskis, Canada, saying he needed to focus on the spiraling crisis in the Middle East, where Israel and Iran have exchanged fire. And he posted in a cryptic social media post, everyone should immediately evacuate Iran. He apparently this goes against the advice of Tulsi Gabbard, who warned against doing something like this. But a lot of people think that the Trump administration has been planning something like this the entire time, if not from the first administration. But then just recently, just either today or yesterday, I think it was today, Ted Cruz goes on Tucker Carlson and is asked a barrage of questions about our relationship with Israel. And Ted Cruz, oh man, he drops the ball big time. It gets crazy. They start name calling each other. There's a fight that happens right there. I don't know if that was live, but yeah, it's not like a physical fight, but they start yelling at each other.
Yeah, I watched that, and I actually was a little bit more on not Ted Cruz's side on like what he was saying, but how he was acting, because I felt that he kept getting attacked by Tucker.
Tucker did
in an unfair way.
Tucker did attack him in some unfair ways, but Ted Cruz really should have expected some of these questions. And it really does, in my opinion, it exposes the kind of tenuous and fluid relationship that IPAC has. Like it's kind of this, it's a weird, it is but it isn't kind of thing.
Well, it's always that weird with when you get to Israel.
Yeah,
and that was kind of the problem and the whole conversation, really.
and before you continue, I just want to say my position on Israel after all of this, just before we get into any of this, it more than ever, my position on Israel now is that it should become, if we want to have, if we all want to have this kind of relationship with Israel, it should just become a U.S. territory, and all of its military we should commandeer its military forces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we should be in charge of all of its military operations. If this is, if we're going to be continuing this sort of special relationship with Israel, I don't think they could have their own military anymore. I think we need to, that needs to be like one of our territories at this point.
I could
be,
yeah, I can definitely see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
or we cut them off.
Yeah, well, I'm more of on that end.
Yeah. Either or for me, like,
yeah.
either it fully becomes like a U.S. territory that does not have its own military, or we cut them off.
Well, like, I could even see us being allies, but the problem
Yeah.
is I can't see the people that are pro-Israel stopping at just like, hey, you know, friends.
Yeah,
because they seem to want to go
Yeah.
well beyond that.
The craziest part, and it's just like, you know, we could have all this commentary, but at the end of the day, Ted Cruz said his number one reason for supporting Israel is because it says so in the Bible. And it's
Yeah.
like, come on, dude. Like, what are we doing here? Like, that wasn't like, even Tucker was like kept asking, are you sure that this is the statement that you want to make?
Yeah.
Like, are you fucking kidding me here?
Yeah.
You know?
I really, I've never understood it. Like the whole is, you know, like, they're our only ally in the Middle East. It's like, and
Yeah.
like that, like, I am tired of spending, and I think a lot of Americans feel this way, tired of spending money, you know, on our end, and, you know, resources just to try and stabilize something that really can't be stabilized.
Yeah.
And if it is going to be stabilized, it has to be stabilized by the people in the region.
Yeah, and that was Ted Cruz's point, is that, and I do agree with him there, that there, because the Iranian people do not like their government. The Iranian people would like to be Persians again. They
Yeah.
don't want a religious fundamentalist extremist government with nuclear weapons. So I think the idea of giving a regime change a kickstart to Iran it's not out of line,
Okay.
but it's still very dramatic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it still follows along with this decades long neocon plan that was formulated before Dick Cheney, but Dick Cheney had a big part in it. It's in that movie Vice.
Yeah.
With Christian Bale playing Dick Cheney. They go over the plan about how they're going to knock over all these. Christian Bale is playing Dick Cheney, and they describe Steve Carell as Donald Rumsfeld, how they're going to knock over 7 Middle Eastern countries in a dozen or so years, or maybe 20 years, something like that. And the end goal is Iran. The end goal has always been Iran. And, you know, Iran is undeniably, Iran is the country that hosts Death to America rallies. You know, they are constantly threatening us, and our position throughout all of this seems to just be, yeah, but they're not going to actually use the nukes, even though they're like a religious regime. And it's like, you know, I don't think we should be invading Iran, but I don't think Iran should have nukes.
I can see that.
Yeah.
But I am more of on the opinion that, like, and yes, like you said, they are the ones that would be like, you know, death to America,
Yeah.
whatever it may be. But at the same time, like, we shouldn't err necessarily all the time on the side of safety.
Yes.
And, you know, we should give them, like, okay, you guys figured it out.
Yeah.
You have one now.
Mhm.
You know, don't use it. Be responsible. You know.
Oh, you mean like with a nuke?
Yes, that's what I'm like. You know, it has to be, like I said, it has to be given like I'm not saying give them a chance because I don't want them to have it either.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to be like, now we have to break your door down and come get this thing, and then they're going to take it too far. Like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, now we're there. Now we got to do other stuff. Now
Yeah.
we got and it's just going to lead into a whole bunch of other things that we didn't sign up for as So no, I think we need to leave them alone, even if they get it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: we can leave them alone. And it's pretty obvious that Israel will not.
Well, that is also true, and that's why I brought up earlier that I don't feel like I feel a huge part of this is Israel's fervent desire for conflict, and without strategic compensation, like they're very vengeful. They're very vengeful in their warfare.
Yeah.
They're less strategical. I feel like they need, if this conflict is to continue in this way, they would need to cede command to U.S. military infrastructure. That's my opinion.
Well, here's the thing, like right here, we have the G7 up here.
Yeah.
And it's like, I kind of just hate to say it, it's like we've been to the Middle East.
Yeah.
The U.S. has done that.
Yeah.
And some of these countries have quote unquote helped.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you guys do feel that strongly about it, let's see you step up to bat.
Yeah.
We've paid our money into the Middle East.
Yeah. If you want to keep doing this regime change stuff,
and we have that potential partner now in the Prince.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good point that you bring up, because I think this was all planned very early on to basically take this strike at Iran. I don't think this was as big of a mess as it's being presented. I think this is the plan all along. Because like I said, it follows along with the neocon plan to knock down all these countries, and it makes me wonder, is this the beginning of World War III? Because it doesn't seem like we're nipping this in the bud. It seems like the Ukraine-Russia conflict is kind of billowing over as well, with their drone strike and not ending, not ceasing. We just had that India-Pakistan kerfuffle.
Yeah.
China and Taiwan are never good.
No.
And we just had these weird riots in LA that I'd like to get into a tiny little bit.
Yeah, and we'll definitely hit on that. I think the last thing I'll bring up before we kind of move forward here a little bit is the actually, let's just go forward here.
Well, what I was going to try to get at is, it feels like if this is the direction that we're going, World War II ended on a nuclear bomb, or 2 nuclear bombs in Japan, and it looks like World War III is going to be about nuclear whack-a-mole. Is going to be the game of rounding up all the nukes before anyone can use them in time. And I think that was the deal. I think this is a major operation. I think that was the deal with India and Pakistan, and that's the deal with this.
As we move forward with technology, this is a semi-technology podcast here. And as we move forward with technology, we are going to get more and more things that are capable of different kinds of destruction.
Yeah.
Some more, some less. But it's I don't know how well we can juggle that.
Yeah.
When it's like everything can be used the wrong way.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can't just keep doing this.
Yeah.
If we want to actually move forward, we're gonna have to figure some of this stuff out.
Yeah.
Because technologies move. Like, what happens if you have a 3D printer that can print something that's highly destructive,
Yes.
and technically, planes are highly destructive, but
Yeah.
again,
Yeah, and I think the logic here, at least the way that I'm looking at this right now, is that we don't just have the nuclear threat happening. The nuclear threat is actually like an old world threat now. Now what we have is kind of what you described. We have the ability to well, we will seemingly soon have the ability to construct kind of whatever we want with AI,
Yeah.
within the next couple years.
yeah, it's
So
coming.
if that is the case, and everybody is racing to build these AI supercomputers, the problem doesn't become the nukes. The problem is that the nukes exist and that these new systems can utilize the nukes.
Yeah,
You
they
know what I
could.
mean?
I mean,
So,
and not just the nukes, but all the other stuff that's going to come with
yeah.
the
So
burgeoning technologies.
exactly. So like it almost feels like um the powers that be have to lock down all these loose ends, which would be, I would consider, religious, quote unquote, rogue governments, as the Western world would view them.
Yeah, and like I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
With all this, like you, but in a way, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Is
Yeah.
we need to come to an agreement on how
Yeah.
we're going to move forward
We
as
need-
as a whole.
Yeah.
Because it's like I think the best thing to do, again, and this is just for the US, is it can apply to anybody,
Yeah.
but we need to focus in on us
Yes.
and then make our country the best it can be.
Yeah.
And then it'd be like, guys, if you want to join us, here are the roles.
Yeah.
You can do your own thing. That's on you.
Yeah.
But I think that's the only real way to move forward, because it's like, we need to set some ground rules that, like, no, we're not going to attack people. We're not
Yeah.
going to, we're not going to do dumb stuff with the things that we have, because the things that we have are dangerous if used the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean that in that way, a sort of breakaway civilization could be formed, in that you could only join the society if you agree to,
Yes. You're going to use these
cooperate.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy to think about. Is that what interstellar civilizations are like? Do they have to, is it like Star Trek where they all have to agree we're not going to use nukes, and then you could,
I think it kind of
something
has
like that.
it almost has to be that way.
Yeah.
Because if you don't agree, like any one of the things that they use in Star Trek,
Yeah.
like that could be used as a devastating weapon.
Yeah.
It's not talked about all the time, but
Yeah.
if you take one of those stars, well, like even in the movie when it crashed,
Yeah.
that took out like a huge portion of that city.
The CIA knows Mars got nuked. That's all it is. The CIA knows Mars got nuked, and it could happen again.
And it could happen again.
That's the problem. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's legit. We're dealing with, crazy world-changing technologies right now.
Yeah, as we move forward, they said in by 2050,
Yeah.
they expect 300 million humanoid robots to be
Yeah, and that is the other angle to this, is this nuclear whack-a-mole, World War III nuclear whack-a-mole, but we're not even going to need foot soldiers. We're going to use humanoid robots to round them all up.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where warfare is going. Who can pump out, as many humanoid robots as they need?
Yeah.
Who has the manufacturing capability? China right now.
China does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do not.
We do not.
Not even
right
close.
now. Not even close.
Yeah.
But eventually we're going to have to get, I mean, I feel like that's where warfare is going, right? Like, we're going to have to do that to match them, and pollute the entire planet with humanoid robots. That'll be its own science fiction.
That'll be its own thing. But yeah. And one of the things that we talked about just on the manufacturing real quick, when we have the solutions, when we have the AI, when we know what we need to be doing, you still need to be able to produce your own stuff.
Yes.
So you still need the manufacturing base.
Yeah. So yeah, you still need the manufacturing base. So we definitely need to get that started up here. But back to one of my earlier points, it seems like you know it seems like this has all been part of the plan for a while now. To me, this is my opinion. That it looks like a lot of this stuff was predetermined, and in my opinion, along with the LA riots recently. And in my opinion, now obviously the ICE stuff is brutal. Obviously, there are legitimate protesters out there protesting ICE. And the whole thing with that, I think there's legitimate protesters with that, but the groups of individuals running up and breaking bollards with hammers and chisels to make improvised projectiles to throw at police officers, that's like guerrilla warfare tactics. That's like planned.
Yeah.
You don't have a group of individuals in face masks with hammers all run up to the same bollards at the same time and break them all apart to get improvised projectiles and then all scatter. That's not an organic thing that just happens.
Well, one of the
Okay.
things that's been like talked about for a while is like the left has been basically funding
Yes.
these different, not just the ICE ones.
Yes.
Like for a long time, like the Black Lives Matter, like
Yeah.
all of that stuff. That's all been funded by the left, or at least talked about that.
Well, and you could use the term the left, but I'm gonna make it more broad and say NGOs. And I would say these NGOs have we can tell what some of their goals are, but a lot of their goals are kind of unknown. And I think this is the beginning of seeing these sort of things be weaponized in certain ways, because in other ways there's pretty good hooks to get people into this stuff. Let me pull this up. Why Waymo cars became sitting ducks during the LA protest? Probably because you could just call one up. Let me see this article. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's pretty much because they could just call them up and they're sitting ducks. But my main point with this article is that these Waymo self-driving AI vehicles specifically were targeted to the point where Waymo had to suspend services in LA. And these are actually taxpayer funded vehicles. So good job there, guys. But I think, in my humble little opinion, this is the beginning of the AI worker revolt. That this is the beginning of taking these protests from BLM, from Occupy Wall Street, all the way back from Occupy Wall Street, and hijacking them into racialized, instead of class warfare, into racial conflicts, into BLM, into George Floyd, into ICE, and now into revolting against AI. And I actually think turning these mobs into revolt against AI is going to be very effective.
Well,
I think that's going to be very effective.
Well, I was going to bring up a similar point to what you just said. I
Mhm.
don't believe this is the beginning of revolt against AI. I think one of the reasons these guys the Waymos were targeted
They
is
just call them in and they just sit there.
well, you call them in and they just sit there. Also, I think people felt better about burning those cars since it's like, oh, it doesn't belong to a person.
Well, and that is, I'm glad that you brought that very specific thing up, because Amazon, I'm not going to pull this article up, but Amazon, it will be testing out its humanoid delivery robots within the next year. So you'll see humanoid delivery robots maybe in your neighborhood walking around. Here's the thing though, Billy, with the concept that you brought up. So they're not humans.
No.
They're not living. They're just objects.
Yes.
Now, you're not most people are not going to run up to a delivery guy and knock their lights out and take their shit. Now, some crazy people might,
Yeah.
but most people are not going to do that. Now, there's a certain threshold of people that will do that to a humanoid robot because it's not a human.
Yeah. So like
It's not actually, it's, yeah.
I will say, like,
Yeah.
We live in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
We we have a bad thing with robots here. They didn't make it.
They didn't make it. Let me tell you what. Holy shit. Let me tell you about the story about Hitchbot.
Yeah.
Hitchbot, the hitchhiking robot, gets beheaded in Philadelphia. Yeah. You bring these humanoid robots down here to Philly, it's gonna be fun. Like they're this kind of stuff is fun theoretically, and don't get me wrong, they are going to try to make this shit work.
Yeah.
In my opinion, they're going to try as hard as they can to make this stuff
Oh,
work.
it's gonna happen.
But there's going to be new revelations about human behavior because of all this.
Yeah.
We're going to find out that humans probably, they don't care about, like, yeah, it's fine if they blow up Waymos and humanoid robots because they're not humans. They don't have humans in them. They're just an esoteric, who owns it? And the insurance will pay for it. It's like one of those things. You know what I mean?
And that's it. That's basically what it is. It's they're going with the insurance will pay for it.
Yeah.
And as friendly as some of these humanoid robots can end up being.
Yeah.
Because you put a large language model inside one of them, it'll be a friendly robot.
Yeah.
They don't have feelings.
Yeah.
That is all part of its programming. Like, even if you talk to Grok, and you're like, oh, you're really friendly, he'll be like, yeah, I just do that because it sounds good for humans.
Yeah. And that is the issue with that, is that we have these AI algorithms that are going to coax us into letting our guard down. We're kind of walking into Skynet a little bit here.
Yeah. And kind of, one of the last things that I guess I'd like to put out there for this is I agree with kind of what you said with the continuation of things from Occupy Wall Street, because that is what I was thinking myself.
Yes.
It is another way, and all of this stuff that we see, I mean, almost all of it on the news, in my opinion, is to get us to look in a different direction.
Yes.
And it's not just for one thing either. Like, it's to get us to look in a different direction and focus in on something else. But it also fulfills, like, the defense contractor, quotas, because they have to sell their weapons.
Yes.
And they are really adamant about doing that.
Yeah.
So, like, the war helps all of that.
Yeah.
And then also the war and the different ICE stuff that's happening keeps people busy about, dumb stuff that really shouldn't be that much of an issue either way.
Yeah.
When really we should be focusing in on, in my opinion, class issues. Because it's kind of getting worse than ever. Everybody sees the prices going up, and they don't seem to be coming back down.
No. Now, all of this at the end of the day is actually class warfare.
Yeah.
And everything else is subterfuge. Everything else is obscuration, trying to obscure the fact that there is a class war happening in this country, and as we can tell with the events that have happened with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, it's looking like there really is no one looking out for the little guy.
No, it seems like, and like, it was brought up. I forget who said. I think it was Elon.
Yeah,
he said, like, the 80% of Americans don't have anyone to, basically speak out for the middle class.
Yeah,
like there's really no one really speaking up for us, and there really should be. Again, we've said it before, like a third party, and this may end up leading towards more of one. Especially with the way things are going. The implosion that's happening within the Republican Party, I think a strong third party
I think that is on the horizon because the Democrats and the Republicans, they really are not delivering. They don't align with like anything people believe anymore. Like, yeah, I think third party is definitely a viable. It will be a viable option. That's my position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and here's the thing.
Mhm.
I think it's going to be iffy, the third party, until, and I should say until, because I'm hoping for the best here.
Yeah.
But I think if Trump goes full out, let's support Israel, let's put troops on the ground,
Yeah.
Basically I'm not going to say World War III because that's not really what it would be. More of another Middle Eastern conflict
Yeah.
type thing. I think because you're going to have the Democratic Party losing all its backing, which it just did.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have the Republican Party, if all that goes down, losing its big support that it gained because it was doing a lot of things semi-right.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be like, oh, I don't want to support either one of those anymore. Yeah. And I think that could lead to more of a third party at that point.
Yeah. And I think that's better for everyone.
Yeah.
But I think we'll call it there for now.
Yeah.
Like and subscribe, guys. We'll see you next time.